Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to PD Alleva with a gripping tale called The Rose. If you love aliens and you like vampires, you're going to totally love this. It's killer. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm great, Denise. How are you doing?
Good.
Nice.
How did you come up with this story? It was so scary and it drew me in so that I couldn't put it down. And it was about aliens and vampires. So you're like, oh, how invested could I possibly get in this book? And then it's like, I guess I'll have to finish it in the next 4.5 to 5 hours.
Right.
Yeah, so I couldn't put it down. I had to finish it. It was just like this exciting adventure, and it only took place over 18 to 24 hours.
Right.
So I'm hoping it's a series so I can hear what happens next.
It is definitely a series. About 7 books planned over the course of the series, right? So we're doing The Rose, obviously, Volume 1 just came out. Then there'll be Volume 2. All right. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going about 10 years into the future, and a new series will take over called, it's either Indigo or the Indigo Trials. I'm not sure the exact title. And the Indigo Trials is what I was writing first. And then I came up with the idea for The Rose, which originally started as a kind of like a little short story that I wanted to put a background behind what was happening in the Indigo Trials. Plus, I needed to figure out the superpower that the Indigo children were going to have in that series. And that turned out to be the Rose, which is an alchemy meditation. It's an alchemy practice. And that's where I got the idea for this superpower. And alchemy is, for those who don't know, the ability to transform chemical structures. So I have some weird philosophies and interests. One of them is alchemy. And I was talking to an alchemist, and they had sent me a meditation. And the name of the meditation was called The Rose. And the whole point of the meditation is to provide protection for people so they don't get their energy drained. In this phase of life, we have something called energy vampires. So you walk into a room and you just feel like lifeless. Somebody's sucking all the energy out of you. And those are called energy vampires. So this meditation, when done right, will protect you from outside forces, energy vampires. So I said, well, that's really cool. I like that. It's for protection. And that was going along with the series for the Indigo Trials. But I had to put more into it. So what am I going to put into it? Okay, so it's for protection, and then alchemy is also transforming chemical structures. So let me allow them to have the ability to transform chemical structures if you are inside of their sphere, right? So the alchemy practice, the meditation, is like you're in a sphere around you, like an invisible sphere. That's your ethereal plane. Oh, anything within that ethereal plane, you can expand it too. You're able to manipulate those chemical structures. But I also added in the ability to suspend gravity and move objects with your mind. So kind of like a telekinetic type of superpower. And that's why I started writing the short story, which turned out to be the full-length novel, The Rose, and then actually will be 2 parts as well. Because those characters wanted to be heard. They had a story they wanted to tell, and they were not going to allow me to keep them to just a short story.
Well, what are some of your interests? Because a lot of the story it's like a war scene. It's that, the loss of humanity, the people that you don't know who's good, who's bad, who's really evil and twisted until it unravels. And you do such a good job of drawing us into the suspense. So how do you create that angle? What type of books, movies?
Okay. Starts off from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So, which is me because I'm 45. So this is me as a little guy running around the house. So obviously Star Wars is a huge influence, especially Empire Strikes Back, which is still my favorite Star Wars movie. So that's Star Wars, but also movies. As far as movies go, look at John Carpenter movies. All right, so he came up with a movie called They Live, which is about aliens who are controlling the whole planet, and they're in our political system. And the only way you could see them is if you're wearing a special set of sunglasses. I love that movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. So movies like that, then keep going. So movies across time, movies like Blade, which is Blade was one of the first movies to have a new take on vampires. They weren't just the romantic, Dracula beings or huge monsters that they were back in the day. Blade made them more active. It was more action adventure. So that book had a huge influence in the action adventure part. And then move on, The Matrix, one of my all-time favorite movie series. So that had a huge influence, and just the action part of it, and then the depth and the lore that goes with it. As far as books, so we're going back to, we have Pulp Fiction magazines, all right? So the Pulp Fiction literary era took place from late 1800s, but really took off in the 1920s to 1950s. And that was your escapist literature. It was pulp, it was sci-fi, it was horror, it was everything. Anything you could throw in there just to entertain people is your Pulp Fiction. And from that, you got authors like H.P. Lovecraft, Ray Bradbury, L. Ron Hubbard, all came from the pulps. When I was a kid, my dad had boxes of these magazines, these pulp magazines, and I just got into them and fell in love with them. So it's highly influenced by the pulps, which are more like escapist literature. And then, let's see, H.G. Wells. All right, so War of the Worlds, Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Keep going, Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit. And then one of my favorite books growing up was Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Still one of my favorites, and I watch the movie every Halloween season. I actually was watching it last night. So those books definitely. I Am Legend, great book as well. So those books, and then let's go into like current novels as well, and current authors. So V.E. Schwab, she's great, fantasy author. She came up with a series called Vicious and Vengeful, 2 separate books, and I love her writing style. She's got an incredible writing style. Blake Crouch is another author who had a very big influence in this book as well, as far as writing style. And then like the thriller component, he writes sci-fi thrillers. 2 great books by him, Dark Matter and Recursion, awesome books. And then Dan Brown. All right, so I love the Robert Langdon. Dan Brown is great because he's got so many things going on, and that was a huge influence behind writing this book, because it's the multiple point of views that are going on in his books, and I kind of brought that in here and getting inside everybody's head. I think that was the main thing, and I think my psychology background helps me to do that, to get inside the head of the characters. So I want the reader to not only know what's going on, but to feel what's going on, like they're in there. They're in the head.
What type of psychology background do you have?
All right. So I have been a hypnotist and behavioral therapist for the past about 15 years, a little bit longer. And so I'm a hypnotist, and my wife and I have a private practice. We specialize in trauma and PTSD. Mm-hmm. All right. And then, of course, addiction in there as well. So I wrote a book, all right, a long time ago called Let Your Soul Evolve, which is a philosophical and self-help book that I wrote with a few other authors. And we turned that into a behavioral modification program because I actually owned a mental health and substance abuse treatment center for a long period of time as well. And that book we give to our patients, and it's behavioral modification, but it also utilizes spiritual practices and allows them to take control of not only their life, but their emotions and how to deal with that in real time.
That was another thing that was exceptionally well done. So your creative use of the English language, it makes it seem like this wouldn't be your first novel. It's exceptionally well done, well put together. Then the characters just being put in these, what you would, looking at the title when battling alien vampires, one thing is certain, get ready to bleed. So you're like, okay, so it's going to be one of those sci-fi alien things. But it's totally not. It's this really rich story. It is, but it isn't. Right. So it's like it drags you through. But then there's just these conflicts of emotion between, like in war, different sides, different countries involved in the war, what their perspectives are, confronted with something evil and how people react to it, making choices in a tight situation, the way that you just did it so smooth. It played out extremely well to the point where I'm going to be up late again. I can't put it down.
It's too funny. Good. I'm glad you had the reaction. It's when you're writing it, to me, what was most important, because I'm also an Ancient Aliens fan. All right, so alien lore and alien theories have always been like a big interest of mine. So I wanted to make sure that if anyone who is an Ancient Alien fan is reading this book, that they're going to be satisfied with what they're reading. So to me, I had to go in depth with the characters and what they were feeling, and I had to go in depth with the lore that was behind the aliens, at least as much as possible in the first volume, because you don't want to give away the secret sauce either, so there'll be more discoveries throughout the entire series. But yeah, to me, it was definitely about making sure that it represented well and that it was as in-depth as I could possibly get. And I think it came out. I'm satisfied with how it came out.
Well, I'm sure your fans are too, because it was just exceptional. I love the interaction of the characters. Their personalities were really rich and well developed. Yeah. You really started to care about some of them, wonder about others.
Right.
And I mean, it was great. I really got to hate the villains.
Gotcha. That's good. I'm a villain fan. I love writing a good villain. You go back to, in literature, there's been so many classic characters. I mean, they get away from, obviously, your Dracula, your Frankenstein characters, and then keep going into today. Look at Hannibal Lecter. I mean, that's a classic character, iconic character. The Joker is another iconic character. There's so many iconic villain characters. I wanted to make sure that my villain had that iconic status as well. And I hope we're getting there, especially with Sonos. Sonos is my man. I love Sonos.
Well, the way that one of the villains, without giving away the story, just the way that everything unfolds, you don't care that something horrible has happened to him.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay. But it's like your adrenaline's high because now you want the good guy to make it away and it doesn't look good. And then
high stakes.
Oh, there's so many high stakes between all the players and different interviews. And it took me like the next day to realize, oh my gosh, there's got to be a series behind this because he's only given me about 18 to 24 hours.
That's right.
That was great.
Yeah. I like the, it's like they're in this underground compound. They're just trying to get out of this compound. And that's the first story. And by doing that and putting them in that setting, I think I was able to get the depth and get the lore that I needed to put behind the characters to say that there's so much more going on to this story than meets the eye, which is what the main character, Sandy, is discovering with the reader the whole time too. She was in the safety camp. She doesn't know no human beings at this point when the story first starts understand or know that there are aliens, that aliens even exist, and then to find out that not only do they exist, but they have conspired with elite human beings and they've been in, behind the whole World War III concept and everything else that's going on, kind of manipulating what's happening. And Sandy finds that out, and a few other characters as well. Cameron, who's actually one of my favorite characters. They're finding all this out at the same time that the reader is. And to me, that's awesome. That's a great way of actually going through the story. That self-discovery is happening with the reader and the characters that are involved as well.
So how did you discipline yourself to write this? Is this actually the first book that you've ever written?
No. Okay. So I wrote my first novel when I was 12 years old. Okay. All right. So 12 years old, I've written about 20. I've published, this will be my 6th published novel. So I do have some other ones. So 12 years old, wrote my first novel when I was a kid, a young little guy there, about trying to make my way in the world. I was writing books, I was writing poetry, I was, doing all that. I was submitting, writing novels, submitting them to literary agents, submitting short stories to periodicals and stuff like that. And then what happens is at 24 years old, the girlfriend's pregnant, and what somebody does at 24 years old, you need to go and get a career and try to get one as quickly as possible. So that's where psychology came in. I needed to go back to school. I needed to switch things up, but I've always been a writer, and that's where I'm at now. But considering going through the whole psychology, I don't want to call it phase, career, I still wrote those books and wrote many of those books, just published a few of them. I consider them my firstborns. So there's 5. All right. So the first one is Indifference. All right. So that's a psychological thriller, and it's about a misdiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic who has the powers to heal and discovers that over one night during a romp through New York City. And then my second book is that nonfiction book, Let Your Soul Evolve, all right, that we developed into behavioral modification. And then I have A Billion Tiny Moments in Time, which is a family saga, metaphysical family saga. And then another series, it's a kind of like a dark fiction horror series that I'm writing. The first book is called Twisted Tales of Deceit, and that has 3 stories in it, 2 short stories and 1 novelette. The novelette is called Knickerbocker, which is a reimagining of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And it takes place in modern times. And it has a modern twist. So all the characters that are in this story, they're all recovering addicts, and they're all teachers employed at the prestigious Sleepy Hollow private school. And then Headless Horseman and all that stuff. It's a reimagining. I had a lot of fun writing that. So I grew up in Westchester, where I lived in Sleepy Hollow for a period of time. So had a lot of fun writing that. And then the second book in that series, the series called Beyond the Chamber Door, is called Presenting the Marriage of Kellyanne and Jerry Denenberg. And that is about a New York socialite. He's an actor, popular actor, that's his career's taken a downturn. He's going through a hard time. And what happens is he tries to commit suicide, tries to hang himself, but his suicide is thwarted by a voice that's in his smart TV that pulls him into the TV, into another dimension, where he has to go through the events in his past and rectify them, because they've all led him to this point in what he's doing, and kind of come to terms with that. But at the same time, ironically, it's funny how life dictates art and vice versa, but it's simultaneously there is a protest happening in California over a terrorist. And what happens is the story unfolds, and there's a metaphysical link between the terrorist and this Jerry Denenberg. And that's the story unfolds there. And that's part 2. Or that's book 2 for that series. And then I have some other, which are true horror books coming out as well. One is called Gollum, and the other is called Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect.
Wow. What's your writing schedule like?
So I wake up early. I'm an early bird. I wake up I'd say anywhere between 4 and 5 in the morning. And mostly that is because I do have 4 kids. 2 are older, but I have twin boys that are 9. So I've been raising kids for a long period of time. So I find the best time to get peace is by getting up as early as possible. So I wake up between 4 and 5, usually closer to 4, and that's where my writing gets done. All right, early morning, nice and dark outside. I get the music going, get the flow going, and go ahead and punch out probably about anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 words a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How long did The Rose take you to finish?
Okay, so that particular book took me 3 months to finish as far as writing, just the writing part. And then it went to content editing. So that book is like 2 years in the making. Between start of writing and then publication is about 2 years. And a lot of editing. I love editing, though. Editing to me is where the true magic happens. Because when you're first writing, all that emotion is just coming out. It's like emotional vomit is getting in there, And as any writer thinks, when you're first writing a novel, this is the best novel that has ever existed, and then you go and read what you wrote, and you're like, did somebody put LSD in my coffee yesterday when I was writing this? Because it makes no sense. You got to pluck out little things and figure out what is working. And the main thing with any novel, I think, is the flow. The flow's got to be there. The reader's got to get into it. It just has to flow. Like, your eyes are just going from, from a letter to a word to the sentence, to paragraph. Next thing you know, you're into it by like 50 pages and just having a good time. So to me, it's about the flow, and that's where the editing comes in, that good flow. So it takes a longer to edit than it does to write.
Wow. Did you have any special training in English or literacy? Any?
Yes and no. So I was that kid that was in the honors English classes, right? So I've read tons and tons of books. And I've always wanted to be a writer. So I went to college for literature and creative writing. Okay. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I had to switch and go to psychology when, that little baby was first born. He's going to be 21 in a month. Amazing. Right. So, yeah. But when he was coming, I switched over to psychology, which I had taken some psychology courses anyway, just because I was always interested in psychology. So it wasn't that big of a leap or a jump, put it that way. So yes, but I've had a lot of training as far as English literature.
Okay. So the characters and their flaws, idiosyncrasies, all of that, do you pull that from people that you've met because of your job? Are your children an influence in any of these? And what do they think of the stories?
Okay, so as far as intricacies and the details about specific characters, so I think it's yes, part of the job, but I've always been a very keen or observant person with the human condition. So I've always been fascinated about how people can go from, being a great person to all of a sudden something happens and they go completely the other direction, and vice versa as well. So I think I draw from a lot of experience on a lot of people in that respect when putting that in there. What do my kids think about it? All right, so my oldest son, all right, so he is legally blind. He lost his eyesight in 2nd grade. So he loves reading. He's still a reader. He writes books himself, and we're probably going to write a couple of books together in the future. But he loves the genre. He loves reading. But so he reads through the Audible app, all right? So that's how he gets his reading done. So when I was first editing this book, and by the way, he's my harshest critic. All right, won't let me down on anything if he doesn't like it. So when I was doing the content edits with this book, I was reading it to him as well. All right, so he knows this book back and forth probably just as good as I do, and he absolutely loved it. He's an Alien vampire fan for life. Let's put it that way. And he actually might be doing some you'll see when the series goes, but there'll be some other offshoots, stories that could take place with some of the characters, and he's probably going to take up one of those offshoot type of series as well. So he absolutely fell in love with the book. My daughter is interested. She's not big into horror just yet, but she'll read it and she'll probably like it. My boys, and they're 9-year-old twins, so they lead more of a sheltered life than my older ones. It's like, when you're a young dad at 24, everything's game. As you get older and you have kids, you're like, maybe I shouldn't let them watch horror movies at 5 years old. Probably wasn't a good idea, but what are you going to do? So with them, they're a little bit sheltered. So when I started talking to them about alien vampires, they're a little bit weary, but they're kind of warming up to the idea now. So I might be doing a cartoon right? So alien vampire cartoon. Tell me, what do you think? Alien vampire cartoon, but no gore, no blood. Instead of those blades that they have, it could be more like just karate practices. And do it where it's more like the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons when we were kids. And I think that they would like that. So what do you think? I think we should do it.
That's great. What about your wife?
Right. My wife, well, my wife puts up with me a lot, but she's awesome. She loves the story. I talk to her about it all the time. She hasn't read it yet, but she will. But I guess it's weird for a wife or a spouse to read the other person's work, because what if you don't like it? You know, and she's more into your nonfiction books. So she's a therapist. She's PhD licensed therapist, phenomenal therapist. She's the type of therapist that teaches other people how to be therapists. So she's more into, at the moment, her nonfiction books, you know, and always learning more about the human mind. So we'll see. But she loves the idea and she loves the concept and she sees it as a movie. So, and I do too. So Hollywood, knock, 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 maybe come over. We'll see what you got, right?
Definitely. It's so well done and insightful and fun, but it really just pumps you up. Not a lot of writers can do that, especially when it's an alternative fiction.
Yes, the alternative fiction. I'm a grunge kid. I love that word alternative, right? Old
Right.
90s alternative fiction. That's a fact. Yeah, throwing everything in there. You know, it's sci-fi, it's dystopian, it's literary, it's a thriller, it's action adventure. It's like everything is in there that you could possibly want, and it's a thrill ride from start to finish. It's the way to do it, right?
Yeah, and you have the perfect amount of suspense to just reel us in. Are any of the books going to be longer than the 300 pages of this one?
Yes, I do. I like watching. I like long books as well. So the volume 2 is definitely going to be a lot longer than that. I'd say probably about 200 pages longer. And then like the 2 horror books that I'm writing now. All right. So Golem is 115,000 words. All right. So that's a long book. That's your classic, probably about 400, almost 500 pages type of book, Golem. And then Jiggly Spot and the Zero Intellect, which I'm still writing. And Jiggly Spot just passed 122,000 words. And I still am writing the ending. And that ending is probably another like 10 to 20,000 words. So I'm going to probably do a survey and ask people if they want me to split it into 2 books or just give them one big book right there. So I'll go for a big book. You know, The Stand, books like that. They're huge and they're long and they get the gut, you know, they're very satisfying. So, but I'll leave it up to the readers at that time. You know, do you want it split up or do you want just one long book?
Well, I look forward to seeing more from you. Thank you for sharing so much about how you create this amount of suspense and action. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want an exciting suspense novel, The Rose has everything you're looking for, especially if you like aliens and vampires. So look for More Things by author P.D. Alleva. We'll see you soon.